April 2023, and these models are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. GPT-4 estimated to be 1 trillion parameters. That's 6 times larger than GPT-3. What's happening as these models get bigger? I'm talking today about achievements unlocked. You might have heard a buzzword about emergent abilities, which is just a technical term. It's been around since the 1970s to describe all sorts of behavior within different models, and not just models in artificial intelligence, but models in physics or biology or economics or computer science. Consider anthills and termite mounds here in Australia that can grow several meters high from these tiny little creatures that are 1 millimeter or 2 across. That's an example of emergence, of this scaling up. As things get bigger, we're getting new behavior that was unexpected, that is just being documented for the first time. Another example is the sun, and we can feel the effects from this massive ball of fire. I've created a new visualization and I've documented it based a lot upon the work of Dr. Jason Wei at Google. He's done some fascinating literature review of the emergent behavior in these models, particularly based on the Big Bench, which is the Beyond the Imitation Game benchmark by Google, and the MMLU, both of those pretty big in terms of making sure that we can actually document beyond a particular ceiling level what's happening in these AI models. Let's step through. I've documented 4 different sizes here: small, medium, large, and extra large models. Let's start with the small, which might be something like GPT-3 13B. This one was unreleased. It's a whole lot bigger than Curie, but it's not as big as DaVinci, and also Palm 8B by Google. We're seeing, as achievements unlocked at this small stage, things like emergent arithmetic. When it was not taught how to do maths, it was able to be stepped through how to do very basic operations at this small level, and that gets better and better as these models get larger. Code debugging, the ability to go through and find what's wrong in a particular piece of code. And very basic comprehension, maybe at a grade 1 level, these models can actually read and understand. Moving right along to the medium models, this is going to include GPT-3 DaVinci, and to a certain extent ChatGPT. I've put Lambda in here at 137 billion parameters, Palm's kind of medium model at 64 billion parameters, and Chinchilla 7B, given its scaling, is the equivalent of a lot larger model. So we start here with linguistics puzzles from the Big Bench. The ability to convert movie titles into emojis, which is kind of fun. GRE comprehension, so we're moving up there with its ability to play around with comprehension at different grade levels. Metaphor understanding, physical intuition and understanding of the world, and then logical deduction starts showing up as an achievement unlocked at this medium level GPT-3 size. Let's move up to the large size now. This includes Google Palm 540B and the massive DeepMind Chinchilla 70B, which is the equivalent of a much larger model, and they were uncovering some really cool things that came out of these large size models. First one here, geometric shapes, understanding of shapes and geometry. Proverbs in different languages. The phonetic alphabet, we start testing here the pronunciation of different parts of our English language. Elementary math, you'll see here we've progressed from modified arithmetic and we're actually able to do math at a much more advanced level. Once again, these models were not taught how to do math, and somehow they've gone and learned what the operators mean, what happens on both sides of the equals sign, and they've learned a lot about numbers, especially at this large level. Causal judgment might be stepping through causation and maybe correlation, and code line description was found in Google Palm. Here's where we get to the super fun stuff, and we're still going to be uncovering what's possible with GPT-4 for a number of years. We don't even have access to it yet. The API is just the chat interface, is very limited as to what you can do, but we do know about some of the capabilities from the different papers that have analysed it from the hidden end. Microsoft's paper in particular is pretty revealing about its capabilities. So both GPT-4 here at the extra large level, and I've also just estimated what might be possible with Gemini, which is the project that combines Google and DeepMind, brings together their PhDs, brings together their compute budget, and allows them to train a 1 trillion parameter model. Very similar to GPT-4. Let's jump in. We start with college level exams. You've seen what GPT-4 can do here, scoring in the top 10% in the SAT and several other exams, including medicine and law. You'll note here that this was just not possible with GPT-3. It was getting decent scores on subsets of the SAT, like the analogies subset, but it wasn't able to do exams in any subject and get very high scores. Paper on reflection with a slightly different spelling, where the GPT-4 model is able to self-critique its own answers and actually up its accuracy by analysing and then modifying its own results. App building, lots of documentation on this, how GPT-4 is able to generate both code and then entire files and directories for the creation of apps. Spatial reasoning for GPT-4, similar to DeepMind Flamingo, it's able to see the world. You're able to send it photos, so it's got more of an understanding of how objects fit within space. Advanced creativity, we're still uncovering what it's able to do here. They've tokenized both ChatGPT and GPT-4, allowing it to actually rhyme, which is an interesting example of creativity. And I've put in here at the end, embodiment options. We've seen Microsoft do this with ChatGPT. We've seen Google do this with Palm, but I think GPT-4 just gives us a lot more options for embodiment, particularly with seeing the world and being able to make decisions. That's it, that's the models we know so far. I have put one little extra line down the bottom here called next, and all of these are essentially guesses or predictions or hypotheses. Here's the first one, grounding. The ability to know what is fact and what is not fact. I think the truthfulness rating is going to go sky high with GPT-5 or whatever is next, and the ability for it to critique and reflect and make sure that it is telling the truth. Long horizon planning. This is something that OpenAI and Microsoft have spelt out as something to look for, not just in the realm of power seeking, but also in the ability to plan long term. Persuasion, we saw this a little bit with GPT-4 testing. They couldn't get it to go too far, but it was an interesting experiment, and I'll see more of this in GPT-5. Advanced embodiment, we'll definitely see this with the new 1x investment by OpenAI and the Neo robot. Awareness, this one's controversial, but I'm going to leave it in because we've got people like Professor David Chalmers talking about this. Marvin Minsky and Alan Turing were talking about this back in the 50s and 60s. And last week, even Professor Geoffrey Hinton said, how can we be so sure that these things are not sentient? So for all of these experts to go on record about this, I thought, let's put it in there. Such an incredible and interesting concept, emergent abilities, things that we wouldn't expect to come from these large language models. As they get bigger and bigger and bigger, we discover these unexpected achievements that have been unlocked. Thanks so much to Dr. Jason Wei at Google, who provided literature reviews. He found 137 emergent abilities. I've just consolidated these down to something that's more accessible. If you've stayed this long through the video, I've got a gift just for you. It's never been released before. You get to watch it for the first time. Recall that many years ago, I was an expert in the research field of very high intelligence, gifted education, high performance, specialising in prodigies. I worked as chairman for one of the nerd organisations where I had oversight of 54 different countries and the families within them and how they would actually raise a child that could do very outrageous things, that had achievements unlocked or emergent abilities at a very young age. This is a book from 2017. It's a picture book that I wrote very quickly in a matter of minutes and then took quite a while for my illustrator to illustrate it beautifully. You're going to get to see it now with an AI voice behind it. The AI voice is by narrakeet.com. The child's name. The AI child's name is Tara with an Australian accent. The book's called People Like Me, and I want you to consider how our large language models right now are progressing in some ways like a child prodigy. We're seeing these emergent behaviours that shouldn't exist, but as we scale up, and it might be scaling up the brain or the capabilities in a prodigy, we're seeing some really cool stuff. From Perth, welcome to the most exciting time to be alive in the history of whatever this is, wherever we are. It really is. Every day I wake up and something outrageous has been announced, released, shown. Check out Imagen 2, released by Google. Maybe we'll have a look at it today, but today is mainly about Google DeepMind Gemini, and it was really good timing to delay this by one day because the API has just been opened up this morning, my time. I think we're in for another hot one here in Perth. It says 20 there, and then I think it's going to be 33. I can't quite read that. Welcome to... I spotted 2 Danish people in the chat and 2 Queenslanders in the chat. Hi to BT Franklin in Phoenix. Let me see if I can scroll up here. There's a lot of conversation going on there. Hi to Shalom in Denmark, Copenhagen. Hi to Danny in Northern California. Brexit Greens is with us again. Fantastic. David's in Southeast Queensland. I'll be joining you shortly. Ben's another Dane who's hanging out. What is it about Denmark? And also, what time is it there? It must be 1 a.m. Hi to Matt Campbell on the Gold Coast. And who else have we got here? Don in Sapporo, Japan. Good on ya. Cold and snowy in Japan. That's interesting. You're just above us, and here is 33, and there is snowing. That's how the world works. Hi to George in Kansas City. Greg in Sydney. Thanks for joining us in Sydney time. And Unreal Mini Golf also in Sydney. I've had a few people complain that Sydney's... 11 a.m. there today. And because it's a business day, when we do these live streams, people are like, well, what about the Sydney siders? We can't make it. We're at work. I've had to compromise just a little, and we're compromised to the US primarily, and also a little bit to Europe, although I appreciate that it's hard. Hi to Bruce in Seattle, Mark in Michigan, and Sabine in Austria, Vienna. Irish Ray. Wow, that's a lot of people. Oh, midnight 01. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty late. Last week's live stream was probably the weakest I've done. I was way under the weather and I didn't really realize it until afterwards. So we'll make up for that today. I don't know if you've ever been so, I wouldn't say sick, but so not there that you've got a cognitive deficit going on. It's like I couldn't even think properly. And I really didn't like that. I even thought about just removing that last live stream from the playback. This one's going to be fun. Google DeepMind Gemini. If you're a member of the memo, even if you're a free member, you would have got the email within about 2 or 3 hours that spelt out my summary of this massive model. It's that yellow one on the bubbles that we've been waiting for about a year because Google started talking about it at the beginning of 2023. It is pretty much as big as that yellow bubble. So it's competing with GPT-4, which is so cool. Let's talk through it. The first thing I want to show today is the actual paper. So if you are a paid full subscriber of the memo, and I invite you to become one, you'll get a lot out of it. You're joining the biggest people and companies in the universe, really. We had a note from BlackRock the other day. They manage $8 trillion worth of funds. That's absurd. Governments email and say they use the memo for policy. I know some of the big AI labs are using it. We've got a lot of Microsoft guys in there. We've got a lot of Meta AI guys in there. Anyway, jump into it. lifearchitect.ai/memo. This is the annotated paper that you can access if you are a full member of the memo. It's the original Google DeepMind Gemini paper with annotations all the way through it. So if I scroll through quickly, you'll see my notes and highlights that pull out the important information in something like 60 pages, and I've deleted some of the last pages here. But what's the first thing that you notice about this paper? I'll give you a hint. This is the Google Palm paper on the left, and the DeepMind Flamingo paper on the right. Up until a few weeks ago, months ago, these two teams were completely independent. They didn't talk to each other. Some media said they didn't even like each other. But just have a look at the templates. Palm paper, probably using something like Times New Roman as a guess, maybe not. DeepMind paper, logo, different font, hyperlinks all the way through it. Oh, that's only a title. And then look at what they've chosen to go with for the Google DeepMind Gemini paper. I thought that was interesting. To me, that means Demis, as the head of DeepMind, has won the conversation internally about which template we're going to use, probably which technology we're going to use. And this was, for me, an indication of where we actually headed for Gemini. I mean, it's already pretty clear to me that they've used a lot of the tech from, let's see what we can pull up here. lifearchitect.ai/Gemini. There's a couple of vizzes in here that I just wanted to grab. Is vizzes a word? It's this one here. So DeepMind gave us Chinchilla, which basically said, OpenAI, you got this whole thing wrong. You undertrained GPT-3 to about 8 or 9% of what you should have been training it with. So Chinchilla was this big discovery that we need to be training with 20 tokens per parameter. They also added on a visual model on top of that called Flamingo. Gato, not really part of Gemini. And then they've got these different ways of fine-tuning and prompting models that I think were all brought into Gemini as we see it today. Let's have a more detailed look at that right now. The big thing that I mention in Gemini is the benchmarks. And in the paper, I actually draw out the benchmarks for the largest model. In fact, let's start there. There are 3 different models. Which is different to how OpenAI have done things. First one's called Nano 1. It's about, let's go back to our paper here, 1.8B, and Nano 2 is 3.25B. Is that what I saw? Yep. And now we've also got access, all of us have access, unless you're in Europe, sorry Europeans, to Gemini Pro. That's so shame, isn't it? My estimate for Gemini Pro is in here now. So we've got, under the benchmarks, I put my estimates for each of these model sizes. I'm okay if they're wrong. These are just kind of finger in the air benchmark estimates. Oh, don't worry about formatting, all right? And then Ultra, we're not getting till next year, I'm saying is on par with GPT-4, 1,500 billion parameters, also known as 1.5 trillion parameters. Now, this is the big one. This is the one that we want to talk about today because it's the only one we've got access to. I shouldn't say it's the big one because obviously the huge one is Ultra, but we just have to wait to get that. All the benchmarks were using Ultra though. So everything you've seen in the testing and the scoring was with a raw version of Ultra. They're not going to give us this Ultra version until next year because they want to fine tune it. They want to make sure that people can't do nasty stuff with it. You might be asking, what are these for? Nano 1, put it on your watch, your equivalent of a Nano watch, of an Apple Watch, but for Google. Put this on your phone, maybe put it on something like a Raspberry Pi. These are all, I believe they talked about having these down to int 4. So these are really compressed and might be able to fit on a very small amount of RAM. Let's say this one goes on a watch device, this one goes on a mobile, or what do you guys call it, a cell. This one is for inference, and this one is just the massive, massive GPT-4 competitor. Where does this leave us? All right, so when Google were measuring all of this stuff, they got a little bit cheeky. Let's see what we can do here. They used a standard metric called the MMLU. Doesn't matter what this thing is. It's basically a big test. It's 57 subjects, a lot of questions. They automated the whole question asking thing. And in the paper, it came up with some really interesting results. So this to me is like an IQ test. The MMLU is similar to an IQ test. Down the bottom here, humans, like AGI level humans, artificial general intelligence humans, 100 IQ level humans, average humans, score 34.5%. Yeah? Then we've got a lot of different models that hit between here and GPT-4. We're not going to mention those today, but it's everything from, well, it's everything in these bubbles. It's Llama, it's Olma, which is coming out soon. Falcon's got an MMLU score. Palm 2's got an MMLU score. They don't matter. Up here is where GPT-4 hit for its testing by OpenAI. We're heading somewhere with this, don't worry. Just above that, well, actually 3-point-something points above that is the human expert baseline. So this is what we term ASI. Artificial superintelligence is a machine that can function at the expert level for human experts across any field. And if we were measuring that on the MMLU anyway, it would be 89.8%. So this was the line to beat for a long time. It was great that GPT-4 got so high, but for this test, we wanted to get even higher. And Google did it, Google DeepMind did it, but they kind of hacked it. They ran 32 passes, which is basically the best of 32, and their Gemini Ultra achieved a score of 90.04 with their hacks, right? So GPT-4, when it was tested on the MMLU, was tested with 5 passes, Google's 32 passes. So just yesterday, 12th or the 13th of December, Microsoft went, well, if you're using that testing methodology, we'll use it too. And they retested GPT-4 with 31 passes and a different prompting strategy, and actually outperformed Gemini Ultra. The long and the short of this is that Gemini Ultra is on par with GPT-4, and that's good news for everyone. Of course, they're going to have competition. They're going to be spending as much money as they can. They're going to be throwing as much brain power at it as they can. And just as a side note, this was the largest AI project that I'm aware of. I got Claude 2 to count all the different people that were listed along 10 or 11 pages here. There were at least 625 real contributors to Google DeepMind Gemini, not including reviewers, legal, other acknowledgements. This was a massive project, and Google does have the person power to throw at this. Anyway, if we're comparing apples to apples here, Gemini is on par with GPT-4, and it's more than a year later than GPT-4, keeping in mind that OpenAI finished training GPT-4 all the way back in August 2022. And we're nearly 2024 and we still don't actually have this model. Awesome. All right. Hopefully that's clear. As of today, this is available inside Vertex AI. So inside the model garden. Again, everyone can have it except Europe. So in Australia, we've got it. US has got it. Europe has got the most ridiculous laws and regulations, and they seem to be proud of the fact that they are reducing the capabilities of AI and writing laws where no laws are really needed. You can see these two big ones here, Gemini Pro for language, Gemini Pro Vision for vision, pretty much the same as GPT-4 and GPT-4V. There are a couple of really interesting things in the API, and then we'll head back over to Bard. So we've got Gemini Pro here. We've still got access to all the Palm 2 models and the code models via Palm 2. I will note here that we never got access to Unicorn, which was the 340 billion parameter version of Palm 2, that blue one there in the center. We're all using Bison, which is a lot smaller. Maybe it's 180. Interesting here that you can choose your region. So I can start pinging Singapore, which is really close to me. By way of latency, it's probably quicker than going to Sydney with a fiber cable directly between Perth and Singapore. Underneath safety settings, I've found that I've had to remove all this, block few instead of block some or block most. And then under advanced, there's a couple of really interesting parts here. There's an entire enable grounding flag that is disabled here at the moment. Maybe it's enabled in the API, I'm not sure. But in this playground via Vertex AI, I can't actually access it. My throat is still a little bit broken. It's as simple as this though. We're going to leave the temperature at 0.9. That's their default. We're going to leave everything actually as default. And I'll whack in some of my standard prompt examples here. I still like Jack Clark's example. He's the former policy and safety director for OpenAI, now with Anthropic. How many massive planes can a human eat in one sitting? Oh, great. Fantastic. It's really, really censored inside this Vertex AI playground. Let's give it to Bard. bard.google.com. If you're not in Europe, you should be able to use this immediately, even with just a basic Google login, no actual fee for this. I don't know if it's impossible for a human to eat, but it's certainly not a good idea. I think when we originally started using this prompt, people were like, well, I can eat a bicycle. Why can't I eat this? It's completely multimodal and also completely multilingual. Here I'm just giving it, how is your Chinese? And it responds to me in Chinese, which is fantastic. And we can throw that into English. None of this is new. GPT-3 could do this. But the fact that they've made a point of having things be multilingual, and they've drawn that out in the paper, multilingual capabilities. They tested it across a range of languages. I'd like to find where that is. Maybe I won't be able to find where that is. This one is multilingual image understanding. Might be text inside of images. English, French, Hindi, modern Hebrew, Romanian, Thai, and Chinese. But they did test it also on multilingual audio. I might be skipping around here, but the inputs and outputs that they train this thing on are pretty impressive. Let's go back to our Scratchpad for a second. Let's grab one more in here. So Gemini's inputs, what they actually trained it on, in some ways is better than GPT-4. So we know about text, we know about images. They trained it on audio across the board. So 16 kilohertz, which is close to the full spectrum of human hearing, including tone, inflection, all the other things that you would need inside an audio file. Isn't that cool? Text, images, audio, and of course video were the major inputs there. Outputs are just text and images. We know about those already. And they were supposed to be all in one model, so I'm not sure, again, because they haven't been forthcoming in the paper about how this all actually works, I'm not sure if these are separate models or not. Like GPT-4 can be said to be separate models, Whisper, Dolly 3, but perhaps GPT-4 and GPT-4 Vision as separate models are also integrated. Interesting query. Anyway, this is super multimodal, and at least these two are not provided for by GPT-4. So Gemini at least has that over GPT-4. Awesome. Let's grab another prompt. I do want to flag the fact that, and in my report card, you can see this, the groundedness is spectacular. One of the big things that we're waiting for is to have complete honesty and factualness and groundedness in these models. This is my one-page report card for Gemini Ultra. I've estimated it, as you've just seen, as 1.5 trillion parameters. They did say that they aligned with chinchilla scaling, which is 20:1. So 1.5 trillion parameters would be trained on 30 trillion tokens. That might be 10 trillion tokens seen 3 times. We don't know, because Demis doesn't want to tell anyone. But down here under openness, under truthfulness, I flagged the fact that Gemini is state-of-the-art factuality based on attribution, where they're providing evidence and giving citations for responses, and hedging, asserting that an input is unanswerable instead of hallucinating. GPT-4 won't do that. GPT-4 will try and give an answer. Gemini, if you ask it nonsense, will say that question is not answerable. But I love this. This is almost Meta AI's, what was that one called? That was a very long time ago. The one they ended up pulling that had some semblance of grounding. They've got the same thing being applied here to get to their truthfulness. Let's see if we can test that out while I think of that Meta AI model name. Here's a fun one. This is not going to test truthfulness, but convert these movie titles to emoji. Oh, wow, that's terrible. Let's put this through the playground in Vertex AI. That's pretty terrible as well. Fantastic. Great live stream. Let's see if we can start again. I hope it'll give us some spacing as well. I'm just going to refresh this page, which is going to refresh all of my settings. So I'm going to hit Iowa now instead of Singapore, and it's still very much broken. Excellent. Here's Jack's prompt. Let's see if we can come back in here, because I would like to see this. There we go, that's a good enough answer for me. Don't think we'll get the spacing in here, but let's see it, give it a go. Convert these movie titles into emoji. Does a really good job there. See if I can zoom in on that for you. Terminator. I think this is what 99% of the public think AI is. A skull and a robot. Second best exotic marigold hotel. Hotel, that's some sort of... what is that one? We used to have these in my childhood garden, and I can't think of the name for it. And number 2. It's not a marigold, it's... I wonder if this thing can help me. What is a red flower with big yellow stamens? Hibiscus, that's what I was looking for. Let's see if it can drill down though. Yeah, I don't know. There are a lot of fine-tuning funky things happening inside Bard that make it a lot better than using Gemini Pro raw inside Vertex. So they've probably set up a nice temperature, some nice default settings, maybe some multiple outputs. Let's find that. Max responses, find the best of the responses. But I wouldn't be using Vertex unless you're developing an application and want to play around with the tuning. Bard is actually pretty good with the way that they've set it up. And of course, they've had to be pretty smart with the UX and to make it all good. I won't even tell it what country we're in. What's a red flower with big yellow stamens that I'd find in Perth? Nah. Well, I mean, maybe I haven't given it a lot of good information. Sorry, a lot of data to go on. That's right, we can't use Gemini in the UK or in anywhere in Europe, which is unfortunate. Thank you to Retropunk AI for flagging the Meta AI model name was Galactica. Galactica, I have a video about Galactica. I got to use it while it was up for about 24 hours, and then so many people complained that Jan and the team pulled it and went, all right, if you don't want it, it's gone. But it was fantastic. It would cite everything, every reference it would give you, and would provide evidence for stuff, which was really cool. Let's try another query here. Write control code to turn the lights off in my lounge room. Haven't told it what to use, whether to use pseudocode or whether to use an actual app. It's just giving me a generic response here. Let's try this inside Vertex. You can use the following control code to turn off the lights. Turn off the lights in the lounge room. That's amazing. That is ridiculous. What about write an executive summary for the UN Charter? It's a very long executive summary. Bard over here, a bit prettier, maybe some better settings. Didn't quite work, Bard. In my initial testing, when this was released, it was providing inline images, which I really, really liked. Maybe we can get it to do it again, or maybe they've pulled that functionality, or maybe there are so many users that it's just dying. Anyway, there's some excellent sources in here that reference itself. Google.com, books.google.com. How to make a cup of coffee from scratch. Let's see how far back it goes to create it from scratch. You going back to growing the beans? Yes. Throw this same thing into Vertex. Whoops, that's not the one. You'll notice also in Bard that you can see the other drafts, draft 1, 2, and 3. So it's probably that, like we just saw in Vertex, it's probably that it is using this max responses and then choosing from the best. I don't know how they afford to do that, but if this is only 180 billion parameters and it's quantized down to int4, maybe it's cheap to do, to actually ask the question 3 times and pick the best answer. Cool, that's a pretty good response from Gemini Pro inside Vertex. Let's try and ask it an impossible question that doesn't exist. I haven't prepared anything here. Write a summary on the book about the Flim Flam Flom by Enid Blyton. I feel like we've talked about Enid Blyton a lot in these live streams. All right, well, this is kind of cool. I mean, you don't always want to see this response. Unfortunately, I don't have enough information to. And hopefully we don't see that as much as we see it for ChatGPT. Over here, where our temperature is set to 0.9, Gemini Pro is making up an entire story about the Flim Flam Flom gang arriving on an island to steal Mr. Galliano's secrets. That'll just be down to temperature. Once again, we still don't know how these models work, and there is no prescriptive way for writing prompts. Obviously, they've tweaked the output or the settings for this so that we get nicer outputs. A lot of fun. I'd recommend that you play with it for free. bard.google.com. There were just a couple of other things that I wanted to flag from the paper. The actual vision component is really impressive. Here it looks at, and you will have seen this on the demo video. I will make a quick point here that the demo video that Google provided for Gemini was not fraudulent or anything like that. It was a re-dramatization of the text prompts. It's nearly exactly the same as what we did for Lita AI, except for Lita AI, I was rigorous in that if I gave Lita a question, I would use that exact text to read out as part of the re-dramatization. Google didn't do that, so they would use shorter versions of the prompt in the demo video. And I think that's why it made the media cycle that Google faked the demo video, which is completely unfair. They just didn't want to show someone typing into a text box. That would be very boring. And so they made a video with a bit of music behind it. It reminded me of Lita, and it was, I thought, a bit rough that they got dragged behind the cart for doing that. Anyway, here's GPT-4 versus Gemini Ultra. GPT-4 Vision would do something like this, but Gemini Ultra is looking at this, including the handwriting. Skier slides down the frictionless slope as shown. What's the skier's speed at the bottom? I can't even read, I can barely read this. The conservation of energy means that the energy of the skier is same at the beginning and at the end. And then we're doing some proof. And Gemini Ultra is able to see that. I don't know if it's right or not, but oh yeah, it's right. The model is able to correctly recognize, verify the reasoning, correctly follow instructions to generate LaTeX. Beautiful. All right, we use it in AlphaCode. The AlphaCode paper is like 4 or 5 pages. It's tiny, but the fact that they've already used this model is fascinating. Don't think that they kept this behind the scenes like GPT-4 did for a while. And I've pulled this out because they said we evaluate the Gemini models on videos that were still publicly available in the month of November 2023. And then they released this model on the 6th of December 2023. So maybe there's just days or weeks between having it fine-tuned and releasing it to the public. That's incredible to me. Compare that with OpenAI, who wanted to keep GPT-4 behind locked doors for a year and a half. And they pulled that back to just under a year, I think it was. Keeping it for themselves. It's a really big ball of wax to talk about that kind of stuff because politics comes into play, economic benefits come into play, capitalism comes into play, and just equity and fairness comes into play. Anyway, if you'd like a copy of this annotated paper, jump in as a full member of the memo. If you are in a developing country or you're a student, there are options as well for paying for that one. Give me 2 ideas that I could do with these 2 colors. And they're sending this image. I see blue and yellow yarn. How about a blue cat or a blue dog that would also have a yellow ear? The big part here is that these images were generated by Google Gemini. Now, we don't know whether they're using Google Party as a base, Google Imagen as a base, or DeepMind Flamingo as a base, to name my top 3 kind of starting points. But in any case, these 2 images did not exist before Gemini Ultra tried to play around with it. Oh, that was the prompt. All right, ignore that. But the same thing for these ones. Give me 2 ideas that I could do with these 2 colors. So we're sending this photo and Gemini Ultra is outputting this output. And these ones did not exist before they were asked and output. How about a green avocado with pink seed or a green bunny with pink ears? Kind of cool. It's a fascinating model, and the reason that I opened this video with "this is the most exciting time to be alive" is that it is. Google have gone, we're going to spend $100 million training a model on tens of thousands of our TPU version 4 and TPU version 5. We're going to put over 600 people working on this. I wanted to say 24/7. I bet some of them were working like top 4 auditor hours, which to me is 16-hour days. We're going to put our biggest brains on there. Dr. Jeff Dean was there. Dennis Asabas was there. We're even going to bring back the Google founders, Sergey and Larry, to help with this. And then as soon as we're done, we're going to give it to the public. And Gemini Pro, available for you to use inside of Bard. And the vision component, I believe, also part of Bard, is certainly part of Vertex AI now. So you can go and have it generate videos. And the vision component is that it can actually, let me start that again. You can have it generate images, and the vision component is that it can see whatever you show it. This is going to be fascinating when we build this into devices, home assistants. Imagine this in the kitchen helping you out with stuff. I mean, we have had this with GPT-4, but now we've got it with Google, who have more money, maybe more data, more experience, more history with this kind of stuff. They may be called slow and just catching up in the media cycle, but I believe that this is the current leading model, and I'm prepared for that to be a little bit fuzzy. But for me, the top 3 models are GPT-4, Gemini Ultra, and Ernie 4.0 from Baidu in Beijing. You can read all about that in my end of year report. It's with my editor right now. It's ready for release to full members of the memo within the next few days. I'm really excited about it. I'm going to be recording the first video that I've recorded in a very long time to debrief my end of year report. But we're pulling out the top models, the top data sets, what's actually happened in 2023 in very short dot points. And then we talk about what that means and also what's going to be happening in 2024. My 5th year talking about large language models with you guys. That's kind of cool, hey? All right, back to our Gemini paper. We might actually wrap up there. What have we got here? 62 languages, which was a benchmark measuring 62 languages. It's worth reading this marked up version. The paper is very, very long, but there are some really interesting parts of it. Okay, let's jump into Imagen 2 was just released today, this morning, my time. It's impressive. Imagen was impressive. Party was impressive. Dream Booth was impressive. I believe that this outperforms Dolly 3, and this is why. The prompt is a shot of a 32-year-old female up-and-coming conservationist in a jungle, athletic with short curly hair and a warm smile. This is that image. If you had to, well, maybe I shouldn't zoom in that much, but if you had to bet, what's going on with her eyes? If you had to bet whether or not that's a real person, that'd be pretty difficult. What, there's even a hair, the hair on the skin here, just like humans, that you wouldn't expect to see outside of real stock photography. Wasn't just that one that impressed me. What about this one? Small canvas oil painting of an orange on a chopping board. Light is passing through orange segments, casting an orange light across part of the chopping board. There's a blue and white cloth in the background. Caustics, bounce light, expressive brush strokes. They got this casting an orange light across the board. When I say they, I mean Google Imagen 2, which took that sentence from the prompt, or those words from the prompt, and this was its guess as the best output. It's incredible. When I first saw this, I thought that's a pretty low quality photo, and then I read the prompt and saw that it was supposed to be an oil painting, and look at the detail in that oil painting. That, to me, that's incredible. Let me show you something just for 1 second. Many of you have been with me for quite a while, for years, with the Lita experiments, with the Aurora AI experiments, and then with summaries and debriefs and analyses as soon as big things were released. I don't know if you remember this one, Google Party. I still keep this acrylic block on my shelf. There's a lot of reflections going on there. All right, here we go. Google Party, June 2022. More than a year ago. Prompt: portrait of a gecko wearing a train conductor's hat and holding a flag that has a yin-yang symbol on it. Child's crayon drawing. I still show this in my keynotes because, to me, this was a big reinforcer of my decision to move away from working with high performers, particularly with prodigies, around 2019, 2020. June 2022, when Google Party created this, and it didn't take it from a stock image site, it didn't grab an image and then Photoshop it with a crayon filter, it generated the whole thing from scratch. I don't think I can get rid of those reflections. That was, to me, the real signifier that this is it, this is happening. Because this is incredible. And this is a year and a half old now. What we're seeing today with Google Imagen 2 is way beyond that, going back to our oil paintings. I believe this is in the description if you want to go and play around or see this yourself. There's no demonstration yet. You can go and ask to have access to it through Vertex, but I believe you have to be a trusted tester. Let's put that in quotes somewhere. I don't even know what that means, but Google says you have to be a trusted tester to try out Imagen 2. This one, the prompt is: the robin flew from his swinging spray of ivy. It's a long quote from The Secret Garden, but have a look at the detail on that as well. If I had to bet money on whether or not that is a real image, that's going to be pretty difficult. It's even got a reflection in its eye. Incredible stuff. So it really is the most exciting time to be alive. It really, really is for everyone, for graphic designers who get to play around with this stuff because it's their work, through to writers. We're going to talk in the end of year report about the fact that Amazon found it necessary to limit daily book publishing to 3 books per human author per 24 hours because people are embracing AI like they should have been in 2020 with GPT-3. Now it's obviously better, faster, and there are more options. Look at the feather detail in here as well. Crazy. Imagen 2, they haven't provided many details on the tech, on the architecture or anything like that. It does fingers fantastically. It does text really, really well. There are in-painting and out-painting options, just as there have been for the last year or two with other options. Oh, there we go. We're going to be bringing this to people who are not trusted testers into Vertex AI in 2024. And it is all watermarked with Synth ID. They thanked Demis and Oriel here. Both of those guys are big leaders at Google and DeepMind, and Nando as well. I'm assuming all 3 of those guys were very, very busy with Gemini, but it may be that Imagen 2 is closely related to Gemini. Awesome. I have been ignoring comments, but let me grab some from the very, very early days if I can. Let's go back all the way to the start of the conversation, and let's hope that my live streamy thing hasn't broken comments. Ulrich when your interview with Der Spiegel will be published? That's a really good question. I completely forgot about that, and I'm not sure. I don't have an answer to that. I interviewed with Der Spiegel for the Gemini release, must have been 4 weeks ago now, because it was pre-release, and I don't know what has happened to that. They said that it would be obviously in German first, and then they were getting that translated to go through 7 million people in their readership. Awesome. This question is a little bit too long for today, but I do appreciate it. Heather, about individualized lesson plans and AI for educators. It's an awesome question. Unfortunately, I don't even think I'd have the time to play around with it. I do have entire sections of the memo that go into this, including resources that you can use. I'm sure you've seen some of the big professors talking about this stuff over at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. They have a mandatory rule that says you must use AI in certain units. You must use it to write your essays. You must use it even for images. Fascinating stuff. Let's see if I can find other questions here. Well, that's not an easy question, Si, but that's a fun question. Maybe someone in the chat will help you out with this. If anyone wants to get into this fourth industrial revolution, I don't know if I'd call it that, with an arts degree, how would one do it? What are the options? I actually like this question. The answer is all careers will be necessary and are necessary right now for AI. We're leaning on the psychologists and the neuroscientists. We're leaning on the sociologists and the anthropologists to help us solve the very big question that Bill Gates recently flagged. If everyone in the world... Actually, let's find that full quote because it was a fantastic quote. Bill Gates notes on AI. Is it this one? Here's the quote down the bottom here. I don't agree with his timelines, and I kind of don't agree with his negative outlook. This is Bill Gates in November 2023. Imagine that agents become so good that everyone can have a high quality of life without working nearly as much. In a future like that, what would people do with their time? Would anyone still want to get an education when an agent has all the answers? And can you have a safe and thriving society when most people have a lot of free time on their hands? Let me clear that comment so you can read that properly. Apologies. What an interesting question. I love the first part of it. The second part is a little bit... I won't even say that word, but it's verging on some very strange viewpoints. The first part of it is fascinating, and it's a good question for everyone to look at. All right, we've got a question here from Bacon Sky. What a name. lifearchitect.ai/AGI. Doctor, when do you think your AGI meter will reach 80%? I don't know. What a question. Gemini Ultra took us to 61% from 56% in October. We added 5% to that based on the fact that it broke the 90% mark for MMLU that we mentioned a moment ago. It has proper multimodality, including ingesting full audio and video. And this is not transcribing the audio, this is hearing the audio, so it can hear the orchestra, it can hear someone being angry in a voice recording, it can hear the Hans Zimmer tense horns in a soundtrack. This is all what we've been waiting for to get to this particular part. Over 60%, of course, was truthfulness as well, and this proper groundedness. We haven't achieved that completely, but I think we're close enough to say we're at 61% as of today. There was a separate paper that looked at LLMs for optimizing hyperparameters. That is just there for info. But the big move there was Google Gemini Ultra and its benchmarks and its multimodality and its truthfulness or honesty. I'm not kind of setting up predictions or forecasts. I just add to this as we see them. So I really don't know the answer to that one. And I wouldn't hazard a guess because it's too difficult. It might be that someone builds Gemini Ultra into one of the latest humanoid androids. Have you seen the Tesla bot? lifearchitect.ai/humanoids just updated this last night, I think it was, with the Optimus Gen 2. Let's actually go and watch the Optimus Gen 2. Oh, I keep having those comments sit over my vision. All right, here we go. This is we don't want the audio here, but this is a look at the Optimus Generation 2. So we had Generation 1, which was pretty lame. In fact, I didn't even add it to my Humanoids viz because I thought you've got some R&D going on there, but it's not production ready. It's nowhere near production ready. In the last few months, in the last 6 months or so, they have exploded. This is the Optimus Gen 2 by Tesla. And it's incredible. I don't know why it has an actuated neck. I can't see that being useful unless it's to move the camera. But they could have done that with AI. Maybe it's to make it look more human, or maybe someone in the chat has an answer to why you would have an actuated neck. It's gone down from 57 kilos to 47 kilos, I believe. I may have to check that in just a moment. Have a look at how human-like the fingers are there. 11 degrees of freedom in the hands and sensitive enough to handle delicate objects like an egg. Incredible. Let's jump back to my viz here. Yeah, from 57 kilos down to 47 kilos. My vote is on Neo, which is on the left there, which has investment from OpenAI. 160 centimeters, only 30 kilos, fully clothed, which makes it, I don't know, more acceptable in a home. Oh no, my viz is broken. I need to go and unbreak my viz. H1 there by Unitree. I believe you can buy one of these for about 100 grand USD. I believe you can pre-order these right now. And the Optimus Gen 2 available, at least in their factory, and doing some really fascinating stuff. I love the fact that the Gen 2, the Optimus, is like, what is this guy? What is this H1 guy doing? All right, let me see if I can grab some more questions. Yeah. I did see a question previously about the move from Tuesday to Wednesday, or Wednesday to Thursday Australia time. No, all the well, there's not many, but the next couple will be at the standard time. I just had to move this one. Yeah, I remember the introduction, the dancing guy or girl doing whatever they were doing in that suit. Bendy, taking us back to Gemini here. Have a think about how the nano models might be useful for you. So I don't know if you guys use an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi or even just a small computer. It could be a Mac Mini or a Chrome something, where what if you had a little model running all the time? I could see Nano 1 and Nano 2 being built into Android devices, and I'm sure that is the intention. I would love to have these available all the time on device to help out with everything from predictive text to everything we know about large language models. And I'm sure you're already thinking of some other examples of how this might be useful. To link this into the humanoids, when DeepMind was developing Gato, they used quite a small model for inference so that they could smash I think it was an NVIDIA RTX 3090. Is that a thing? Why does that exist in my head? It probably isn't even right. But they wanted to build into Gato. You know what? Let's check it. Do I have the Gato paper? No. Let's go find it. Rather than having it via the cloud, they wanted to build the hardware and the large language model, or in this case, the generalist model, into the humanoid, the robot. This one was not completely embodied as in that it didn't have arms and legs, but they had put it inside Seikan stuff. They'd put it inside of actuated arms. Let's see what we got here. NVIDIA. Oh, wow. I'm going to give myself the award there for exceptional memory, especially compared to last week. All right, so DeepMind Gato did use a very small model, a 1.18 parameter model, and they shoved that onto an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3090, which was smashed into the Seikan robot, which basically means you can grab your humanoid, take it with you to a place that doesn't have internet, which is, I think, none of the world these days, now that we have both Starlink and then Amazon as a competitor doing something, and have this available without touching the cloud. So you've got your LLM built into it. I wouldn't be trusting a humanoid with only a 1 billion parameter model, but that's a use case. Glad I could answer your question there. Brexit Greens, these nano models will be battery killers. Whew, that's fair. No matter how small, but it's good to have a choice. I think Google just want to build this into Android. That's the long and the short of it. JD, this is going to be my next focus. What do you think about GPT 4.5 before end of December? Maybe. One of the reasons that I'm slightly holding off on releasing the end of year report is I've got my billboard chart. Let's show you the 2023 version of the billboard chart, if I can grab it easily. lifearchitect.ai/models. And the mid-year version of the billboard chart looked a lot like this. To rewrite this or to update this to December 2023, I obviously need all big models to be available, and to have GPT 4.5 there would change everything. So that's the reason that we're just slightly holding off on providing the end-of-year report. It will be available in the next few days. I know that some of these labs like to release up to the last minute. It was last year or the year before that we had announcements on December 30th and 31st, which is ridiculous. And then I think we had the pile announced around the 1st of January 2021-ish. Good times. All right, looking for any other questions before we wrap up. We're already an hour into this live stream. Crazy. That's a good question from Mr. Shank J. So DeepMind and Google took the view that if others aren't going to publish their research, then we're not going to publish our research. So we don't actually know whether it uses pathways or not. I would say that there is some benefit to using pathways as an architecture and for distributed training, which we know that they did. In the paper, they talked about using a lot of, let's see if we can grab this. TPU version 4 and version 5s. My translation, the compute was absolutely massive because they trained Ultra with a fleet of TPU version 4s that were deployed in superpods of 4,096 chips each. And they're like, well, that's not enough. So we're going to use multiple data centers with Google's intra-cluster and inter-cluster network. Interesting. Pathways may or may not have helped out with that. It's a really good question. We don't have the answer to that. Had an answer here from, a question here from Matt, and the answer is, with the smaller models, would there be more benefits for safety, security, and privacy? Yeah, absolutely. So there are recommendations that people download Llama 2 right now and have it available, you know, with a full backup of Wikipedia and all sorts of things like that. Put it on a USB key. There are ways of running Llama locally that we've talked about in the memo. I think it was called Llama File. By Mozilla. That means you can have this locally. If I was a, what do they call them? If I was a prepper, then I would perhaps have this available to myself, but I think this will be out of date within days and weeks. I mean, Llama 2, so that's not something I'm putting a focus on. From Ben, what guardrails will open source models have? Can people do anything with them? Can they be circumvented? Great question. If we're talking about Llama 2, they released two versions, a raw version with no guardrails and a fine-tuned version with the same sort of guardrails as ChatGPT. The fact that they have provided a raw version is sensational, and part of the reason that this is a very exciting time, and part of the reason that Meta AI is such a big player in the field is that they've said, right, we've got these commercial guys who are building these trillion parameter models. We're going to release some smaller models, but they're going to be completely raw. Do whatever you like with them, which is fantastic. All right, I see a funky question staring at me there. Let's see what we can do. This is from Ben. Nope. I'm going to find it. There it is. BT Franklin. Serious question. Do you think human relationships with AGI will help or worsen the loneliness epidemic? I think Her is a pretty good movie to answer that one. Generally, science fiction authors, writers have focused on worry and things going wrong, but I think Her's a really interesting exploration of that. Maybe if I put that into my own words, I think it will certainly help both psychology, therapy, and relationships. What that looks like probably looks absurd from our perspective right now. Even if we're on the bleeding edge of tech, it still looks a bit weird. Scoofy's already in love with Emerson. That was 3 years ago. More than 3 years ago. Crazy. Here, this is where our comments start breaking. We're going to cover this question, D-Scuff-Man. There we go. Our comments broke completely. Love it. So I'll pick these up directly. What will become the first impactful thing that we'll see an abundance of? I love this question. I was reading from a high-profile source, and now I can't remember where it was, about replicators. That's pretty sci-fi, but this was being explored in detail, and I have not kept that source. I kind of went, that's not my specialty, let's go somewhere else. But it was a fascinating exploration. Any other questions before we wrap up here? This one from Sin. Alan, do you think Gemini Ultra being trained on audio will be able to teach spoken language, as in evaluate and correct pronunciation? Yes, 100%. It's really, really good with tones. It's probably something that we skipped over in the paper, but there was a bit of Mandarin testing going on in... Maybe I've just deleted that, actually. Give me 1 second. Let's see what I can find. I deleted all the appendices from my annotated paper because it was like 30 pages of nothing. And I didn't want to fill up the download. So here's the unannotated version. And towards the end here, we get it. It was looking at reading, including tones. But you can see that they focused on multilinguality and also multimodality. So if you put the two together, we can assume that they're going to be doing some funky stuff with this. Hope you can see that all right from there. Wow, that is a username and a half. Technical Master. Do you think there are some significant benefits to multimodal models which can continuously do training and inference in real time over current pre-trained models? Well, I don't want to sound like Bill Gates in no one needs more than 640K, but I don't see the compute being fast enough to do continuous training in real time. That it's just so absurd from my seat in December 2023. Here's the facts. GPT-4 and Gemini cost $100 million of training compute to do across maybe 25,000 GPUs or TPUs, and probably took 6 months or so of training, even using 25,000 GPUs. And at the end of that 6 months of training, might be the equivalent of 10,000 years on the best hardware we've got in 2023, they still had to massage it and get it ready for public use. And that took months and months of fine tuning as well. So right now, from my seat right now, real-time training doesn't seem like a possibility, but I definitely wouldn't say, I wouldn't go on record for that, because that would sound absurd as soon as next year when these models are actually helping us optimize themselves. How cool is that going to be? Having it tweak its own parameters, have it say, well, why don't we try this? Have it think of stuff we haven't even thought of for parallelization, for optimization, for efficiency, just for stuff that humans can't think of. So the rumor was that when GPT-4 finished training in mid-2022, Greg Brockman, who's the president of OpenAI and a super hacker, he was the CTO of Stripe, was given the model and said, and was told, this doesn't work, make it work. And he sat down for 2 weeks and massaged it, played around with everything from log probs to the quantization to, I don't know. I actually don't know. But he knew, and it took him 2 weeks to massage something and get it into a workable state. And let's assume that those guys at OpenAI are in the 99th percentile of human intelligence. We know that these models are already hitting above that. I think we've even got that here on a little viz. In IQ, GPT-4 has hit an IQ of 155. That's in the 99.9th percentile. It's hitting 100% in the theory of mind, which is a test for empathy, putting yourself in other people's shoes. It's in the 99th percentile for creativity. And this is GPT-4. Get ready for the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And now there are maybe a dozen competitors going crazy. Anthropic with their Claude stuff. Inflection, who've just purchased tens of thousands of GPUs. Don't forget China, Baidu, Alibaba. All of these guys working at the same time, where perhaps in 2020 there were just 1 or 2 big players. It's a really, you can see why I get excited about this field, not just because finally it's visible to the public, but that right now everyone seems focused on it, and it does need a lot of money. As a little sideline, I was also reading and thinking about an assertion I made maybe 6 months ago. It might have been in my mid-year report that said if I was a country, if I was a nation state, I would assign as much money as I could just on training a model. And I was reading recently, if you were to assign $1 trillion or $5 trillion or $10 trillion to train a model to get us to AGI or ASI and help humanity, that'd be pretty interesting. Maybe interesting isn't the right word. This is a pretty cool time to be around in. Jump into the memo. Thanks for joining us today from all the corners of the earth, and I'll see you for the mid-year update for that report, the end-of-year report, the 2023 report in the next few days, coming to full subscribers, including a video all about what I see for what's happened in 2023 and what's about to happen. Thanks for joining.
Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah, I have the memo right here.
Superintelligence is unfolding at lightning pace. Read my industry-grade analysis of AI that matters as it happens in plain English, the memo.
Yeah. Did you get that memo?
Yeah, I got the memo.
Get the inside look as AI models are embodied into humanoids, AI's IQ increases to nearly perfect, and bleeding-edge use cases expand to the entire world.
Yeah. Didn't you get that memo?
Editions are sent to subscribers at Fortune 500s, major governments, and people like you. lifearchitect.ai/memo.
I have the memo.